Alright, YouTube, back for another conspiracy video. Alright, so this one is my story about meeting the black-eyed children. But it really wasn't a child, it was an adult. But at the time, I thought it was a black-eyed child. But later, I'll explain how I found out that it was a black-eyed adult. So, I had a friend whose name was Travis. His last name I'm not going to say for the family's reason and because he's not alive anymore, so I'll be respectful of that. And his brother was Tyler, also not going to say his last name, but they were brothers, so they had the same last name. So it's Travis and Tyler. And we were driving that day to go get Travis's medicine. He had schizophrenia, so he was there to get his schizophrenia medicine. And so we were driving to mental hospital that's in Kissimmee, Florida, and it goes by the name of Park Place. So we were headed to Park Place to get his refill of medicine. So now you don't enter the actual area of the hospital, you enter like a side building that is where you get your medicine at when you go to Park Place. So we were dropped off by his mom and we go to enter the building. So I'm the type of person that I was raised to be courteous and kind and to be respectful towards other people, and most of the time doing that just means opening the door and being nice to somebody. So I went to open the door for my friends. So as soon as I opened up the door, I could tell that something was wrong. I could sense the EM coming off of this person. So now I'm a martial artist, so I've dived into using chi or spiritual pressure or spiritual energy in martial arts. So I've learned to channel and focus it. So when somebody else can channel and focus or is dumping out EM and stuff like that, or chi, whatever you want to call it, or spiritual pressure or spiritual energy, whatever you want to call it, depending on what part of the world you're in. Well, anyway, so I'm just going to call it chi. So I could sense the chi was coming off of this person or being or whatever you want to call it was very evil, very bad. It wasn't good. It didn't feel good. It felt almost heavy and oppressive, and I could sense the bloodlust and evil feelings and, you know, anger and stuff like that. I could just tell right off the bat. So I held the door open for him, and they walked in and it closed, and so Tyler went and grabbed the second door and held it open for us. So Travis went in the room first, and then I came into the room. So I wanted to enter the room last behind them, but that didn't work like that because he opened the door for me since I opened the first door for them. So Tyler was holding the door, so when I went in, I stepped off to the side to the right of the room, and it was just past where people were sitting, like literally just maybe a foot from where somebody was sitting, but there was enough space there I could tuck myself against the wall over that side. So I went over there, and then he came in, and the door closed behind him. And I was just looking around, and they just walked up. They didn't seem to notice that I was just waiting behind and staying behind and looking around the room. So they walked up to the counter, and we're walking up to the counter. So I'm looking up around, looking up and down all the rows of chairs. There was one here, then two in the middle, and then one on the side on the right. So I looked towards the left first, looked at all the people in their eyes, because the eyes are the windows to a person's soul. So if you look them in the eyes, you can tell exactly what's going on with this person or being or whatever. So I was using that to try and find out who I was feeling this energy from, this chi from, this bad chi from. So I looked at the first row, all the people in the eyes, nothing. Looked at the people in the second row that were facing away from me, but I didn't see anybody that it would have been. So I looked at the third row, all the people in the eyes, nothing. Then I looked at the fourth row, and I reached about 3/4 of the way up, and there was this little girl sitting there. She had black hair, and she looked like a little girl. She looked like she couldn't be more than like 11 or 12 or maybe 13 tops. And she looked at me, and as soon as she looked at me, I could tell that it was her. I got the feeling of her. She hit me even harder than it had been. Before, it was just like a little bit. Now it increased a lot. And I could just tell it was her, and it was hitting me like wind. It felt like wind hitting me. And it was like oppressive wind, because it was like evil and bad feeling. So it wasn't like a good wind hitting me. It was spiritual wind hitting me. Very bad spiritual wind hitting me. Very bad chi wind hitting me. So I looked her in the eyes and everything, and she knew that I knew, and so we just stared at each other, and I walked up, and I made sure that I didn't take my eyes off of her, and went past her to this wall, and it turns to the right and turns to the left, and there's a hallway that runs to it, so it was perpendicular to it. So when you first walk in, it's a straight, and then it forks off and goes perpendicular to it. So I went off to the right, where there's a hallway, and then there's doors that block it right there. So I backed right where it turns. It was like straight, so it wasn't like a curved into it. It was more like a straight edge into it. So I backed up against right where it went to turn. So I hadn't really reached the hallway that ran perpendicular. I was still in the hallway that you enter in. And so that way, at that positioning, I could keep an eye on her. So I was keeping an eye on her and whatnot, and watching the room, and watching Travis getting his medicine and waiting, and it took a long time. It felt like longer than it was, so I don't know. It could have been like 20 minutes, but it felt like an hour or so before he got his medicine. It could have been an hour, but I'm not quite sure. I didn't check time or anything on it. I was just too busy paying attention to her, keeping an eye on her, making sure that my back wasn't turned on her. So they go to leave, and I fall in line behind them, or I fall in line in front of them. So I wanted to fall in line behind them, but they paused, right? So when they were going to go walk past me, they paused. So then I knew that it wasn't going to happen, so I walked in front of them. So I go to walk past this girl, and as soon as I go to walk past her, I felt the urge, as if like the pull of her eyes, to look her in the eyes. So I looked her in the eyes, and as soon as I looked her in her eyes went completely black. Her pupils swelled up. So that's where you get the black-eyed children from. But she was a black-eyed adult, like I'll explain later. But as soon as I looked her in the eyes, her eyes went completely black. So I paused and stared her in the eyes. And as soon as I stared her in the eyes like that and paused, time slowed down for me. It slowed down so slow that when I looked around the room at the other people to see if they were seeing what I was seeing, it looked like they were ticking. They were moving so slow that they were ticking. And when I looked around the room, half of the room was staring at me and half the room was staring at her. So I was just saying prayers for her and this and that, because I could tell that she was possessed by a demon. So I was praying for not only the demon, but also for the girl's body that she was inhabiting. Well, anyways, so I was just praying for this half-breed and that, and as I was doing that, I noticed a nurse come in, and as soon as I saw her eyes fixed on the eyes of this little girl, the black-eyed little girl, she dumped her entire tray of pills, and I could just see the tray falling, and each pill just individually just ticking down. It was moving so slow that it was ticking. And now normally what would take a fraction of a second for the pill to just fall and hit the ground. It took minutes. It was just so slow. It was just ticking, tick, 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 ticking towards the ground until it finally hit. And then when I finished praying, I just turned and went and walked away from her. Now, when I went to walk away from her, it felt like I was walking through a barrier, like she was trying to keep me from walking away from her for whatever reason. But it just felt like I was walking through a really heavy wind that was blowing towards me, like really oppressive, fast blowing wind. But it doesn't really matter to me. I just walked right through it like it was nothing. Went and walked out. So I opened the door and walked out. And then they walked out behind me eventually because they fell in line behind me when I was walking out. And then because time was so much different for me, I went out way faster than them. So I was waiting for them to come out. And then when they finally came out, I let go of the door and it closed behind them. And as soon as it closed behind them, time went back to normal for me. And the feeling of her went away. All the spiritual pressure and everything like that. So we got back to the car, and got back to the car. Before we got back to the car, we were talking about it. I was like, did you see that? Did you see that? And they're like, yeah, we saw that. And they're like, you're talking about that girl, right, with the black eyes? I'm like, yeah. I was like, you know that she's a demon, right? And they're like, nah, we didn't know that she was a demon. How do you know that she's a demon? I'm like, I could just tell. And they're like, nah, she wasn't a demon. You know, even people that believe in God and religious, they're like, oh, demons don't exist, and the devil doesn't exist, and that. I don't understand it because, I mean, it talks about it in the Bible, the devil and demons and that, but they just seem to be like so naive about when it comes to the devil and demons and that. So you mention a demon, they're like, oh, demons don't exist and this and that, and there's no way that she could be a demon and this and that. So we get into the car and we drive off, and I'm like, you know, Travis, if you ever get locked up at Park Place and you see her, whatever, make sure that you ask her one question, and it only needs to be one question, and this will let you know for sure if she's a demon or not. And I said, ask her how old she is. And I said to him, if she says that she's old, or really old, or too old, or so old, or anything like old, just really old or whatever, anything about old, then she's a demon. And if she says her actual age, then you're talking to the human aspect of her. And she's telling you the human age of the person that is possessed. And he's like, oh, nah, you're joking. That isn't going to happen. I'm like, just make sure you ask her how old she is. And he's like, oh, shrugging it off, like, oh, it's nothing. So, like, less than a month later, it might have just been over a month later. I'm not quite sure, but anyways, Travis got locked up again in Park Place. So they end up putting her in the same room as him, of all possibilities. He ends up in the same room as her. So she comes in and she sits down on her bed, and she goes to like lay down. So she's like laying down now, and he's sitting up staring at her, with his back against the wall, and he says, how old are you? And she said that she gave him the dirtiest look, like the most evil, like, I hate you for asking me that question. And she was so angry at him and this and that. That was just the vibe he got from the look from her. He said that as soon as he said that and she gave him that look, she said, old. All she said was old, and she said it in a slow, creepy, almost masculine voice, but like feminine, but you know, like deep and drawn out and just like old, almost like that. And she just said old to him and looked at him all crazy and everything. And he's like, I just got the weirdest feeling from her when she said that. And he said it was like every hair on the back of my neck just stood up. You know, like, he just had that sense like something was off with her. And then he said like a few seconds later, like a few seconds to like 30 seconds later, out of nowhere, she just said that she was 18 or 19. I can't remember what he said, but she said that she was 18 or 19. She was overage, but she was like young. It was either 18 or 19. It wasn't 20. I can't remember. It's been a long time, but it was either 18 or 19 what she said. That's how old she was. So, the human had taken back over at that point in time and said how old she was, which was 19 or 18 or whatever. Well, anyways, so that's how I found out that because of her age, she was a black-eyed adult and not a black-eyed child that I ran into. Well, anyways, that's the urban legend myth of the black-eyed children for you. Alright, see ya.